Hey guys, Jason here with RWB NetSec, and for the video today I'm actually going to be starting a new series, and I would like to get your all's feedback on this. I thought it might be neat to start going through some of the Boot2Root challenges that are available on VulnHub. So VulnHub is a site that contains numerous challenges. They're all virtual machines that they're set up for you to try to break into, just like you would come across on a pen test. So I think by walking through some of these systems, it actually gives you more hands-on practice. And I think that's probably the best way to kind of learn some new techniques, learn how the tools work in a kind of a quote real-world situation. So if this is something that you guys would be interested in, just let me know in the comments below. And if it's something that looks like it's going to get some traction, something that you guys might be interested in, then I'll start doing more of these type of videos. So the first one that we're going to be looking at is called NullByte. And this is one that you can download from VulnHub. And I will put the link to it in the description below, so download that when you get a chance. You'll just need to set it up inside of either VirtualBox or something like VMware Player. We're going to be using Kali 2 as the attacking machine, so if you've been following any of my other videos, you should have Kali set up already. So that's just kind of a brief introduction to this one, so let's go ahead and get started with this. Alright, so once you get NullByte downloaded, go ahead and get it set up in whichever virtualization software you're using and launch the machine, and also make sure that your Kali machine is started. Also with that, make sure that both machines are configured to be on the same network and that they can communicate with each other. So when you boot up NullByte, you're just going to be presented with a login screen. It's just going to look something like this. As long as you get to this screen, you're okay. Just go ahead and minimize it because we're not going to have to directly interact with it. Everything that we do in this video is going to be done from the Kali machine. So within Kali itself, we're going to, let me just close out of the browser here. We're going to be using a tool to keep track of our notes as we go through this tutorial. And the one that I like to use is called Keep Note. So if you just go up to Applications, Reporting Tools, and then come up here to Keep Note. And you can see I've already created one, but when you open yours, if you've not used this program before, it's very simple to use. But you're going to want to create a new notebook. So you'll just come up to File, New Notebook, and it's going to create this folder here. If you want to, go ahead and just name it the same as mine, or however you want to call yours. And we'll leave it set there. Keep Note will let you keep everything organized and separated. So for example, we can create a separate page to keep track of any port scans or anything like that that we do. That way it's a lot easier to go back and reference that particular section of the test as we go through it. It also lets you do screenshots, so that comes in pretty handy. That's something you'll want to get in the habit of doing, especially if you are going to be doing pen testing on a professional level. You'll want to do screenshots to include those in the report that you give to your clients. And then once you get finished doing the assessment, then you can export this notebook and save it. I think it gives you the option to save it in HTML format, and then you can include those notes then with your final report. Alright, so let's go ahead and create our first page within NullByte. Just right click on your folder, go to New Page. If you click on it here, you can rename it. And this first one is going to be, we're going to do it for host discovery and scanning. So let's just do discovery and scanning. Hit enter. And then all of the notes that you keep will go down here in this bottom section, this bottom pane. So now if we go and open a terminal window, and we're going to start going against the Null Bot virtual machine. So the first thing we're going to need to do, of course, is to find out what the IP address is for the machine. And we're going to use the net discover tool for that. So if you just do net discover tac r, which lets you specify the network range, I'm going to do 192.168.1.0 and /24. We'll hit enter. And it looks there like it's .186, so I'm just going to Control C to stop this. So like I said, you can do screenshots with Keep Note. So if you come up to Edit, Insert Screenshot, and then you just select the area of the screen that you want to keep, and there it saves it for you. So now you've got that. If you want, you can click on the image, right click on it, and resize it. Just make it a little bit smaller if you wanted to. And there you've got that to go back as a reference. So we know that our machine is .186. So let me come back to my terminal window here. Now the next thing we're going to want to do is run an nmap scan to see what ports are actually open on this machine. So I'm going to clear this screen out. I'm just going to do a quick nmap scan. SP 6535 and then our Null Bot machine 186. Hit enter. And I'm telling it to scan all of the TCP ports just in case something is running on a higher port number. Sometimes you'll run across where an admin may configure a service to use a non-standard port, and it's kind of one of those security by obscurity things. So we've got our results back here, and you can see, just like I said, they've got SSH running on port 777. So if we had just done a default nmap scan, it may not have found that one. So I always like to run it against all ports starting out just to see what shows up. Alright, and I'm going to want to do another screenshot here. And I'm just going to copy the ports. That should be good. That way I've got a listing of the ports so I can come back to those as I need to. So now I've got both of that. We've discovered the host on the network. We've run an nmap scan against it and found the open ports, which it looks like there's just 4 ports open, so not too many have shown up here. So now we start looking at what we can do with these ports, and we're going to start looking with port 80. That seems to be the default that everybody goes to first. Alright, so since we're going to be starting out looking at port 80, let's go ahead and create another page within Keep Note so we can keep track of it. So if you just go back up to your folder and right click and do a new page, and let's see, let's just call this one http/80. That way we'll know which port we're actually looking at. And from here, let's go ahead and open up a browser and just go to that address and see if there are any web pages that are running on that server. So it's 192.168.1.186. And we have a picture of an eye. Doesn't look like there's anything to click on here. And a quote. So nothing really on the page itself that we can do. Let's have a quick look at the page source, because sometimes you can find comments that the developers leave behind that could have some useful information in it. But this one doesn't really have anything showing in it, so let's close that out. And tell you what I'm going to do quick. I always like to have an image of what the page is that I'm working on, so I'm going to do another screenshot here. And I'm just going to capture this piece of it. Let's resize the image, make it a little bit smaller. Alright, so there was nothing in the page source. There's nothing on the page here to click. The next thing that we can try to do is see if there is a robots.txt file. Nothing there. So now let's run a tool that will do a search and see if it can discover any additional directories that there might be on this server. And the tool that we're going to use is going to be dirbuster. So if you go up to Applications, Web App Analysis, and then go down to Web Crawlers and Directory Brute Force. Let's go to dirbuster. And in this first box here, we just need to type in the target URL. We need to give it a word list to use for the brute force attack. So we're going to go to User, Share, go over to dirbuster, and then word lists. And then I'm just going to pick this small list here just to kind of save some time. And I'm going to leave the rest of these options set like they are. And just go ahead and click on Start. So what dirbuster is doing, it's going to run down that word list, and it's going to see if it's going to try to look up each of those directory names and see if it gets a response. If you click on the Results tab, you can see the response codes that it's getting back, whether it's a 200 to 403 or whatever it would be. And you can kind of go by that to see which ones actually exist. And it looks like it's found a few here. We can manually go in and see if we can browse to those directories. So let's try the uploads directory, see if it shows anything. No directory listing allowed. How about the JavaScript directory? And we don't have rights to get to that one. So it seems like dirbuster's not really finding a whole lot as far as additional directories. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and do another screenshot here. I'm notorious. You guys don't have to do this exactly as I'm doing it. I'm a very detail-oriented person at times, so I like to keep track of everything that I'm doing just in case there's something that I need to go back to later. So I'm just going to do a quick screenshot of these directories that it's found in the status codes, just so I've got that here. Go back to our browser. So let's just go back to the main page. The only other thing here that I would look at would be the image itself. Because what happens sometimes, whether it's a developer or whoever's working on this site, may hide information within the metadata of the image, or maybe within the binary, or not the binary, but the code itself of the image. So what we can do is, if we download the image, so I'm just going to do a save image, and I'm going to save it to the desktop. I created a folder called Null Bot on my desktop. So I'm just going to save it here. And if we go into that directory, and we want to right click on the image, actually let me open the terminal window here. Just change to that directory. I'm going to use the display command for the image. And once you get it open, if you click on the image and you've got all these options here, we want to go down to this miscellany option and click on image info. And this is going to show us all the information about the image, all the metadata that's included with it. So if we just start looking down through here and see if anything sticks out, if there's anything interesting that we could use. This is all the data about the image itself. Color maps. Rendering. Properties. What's this comment here? This could be something interesting. This string of characters here, it almost looks like something that's encrypted. But I know from working on other vulnerable systems and doing other things like this, there are times that somebody would use something like this as an actual directory name. So just for the heck of it, let's see. It won't let me copy it, so let's go back to the browser. Let's just type that in and see if it's a directory, perhaps. KZ MB5. All right, now it's taking us to another page. Let me go ahead and close this image information. Close this out. So now we have a new page to look at. Let me minimize this down. Minimize this. So I'm going to do another screenshot quick of this since it's a new page. Make sure that I get the address that references it. So it's asking for a key. So what could we do with this? What happens if we type anything in here? Let's type some random letters. Invalid key. Any potential SQL injection issues? I just entered single quote and a double quote into it. So nothing's coming up. Let's look at the page source again to see what it's doing. This form isn't connected to MySQL. Password ain't that complex. So we can see that we need to find out what the password is for this page, but apparently it's not connected to a database on the back end. So we're going to have to try to brute force this somehow. So we know that when we type in something wrong, that we get this message back for invalid key. So Hydra is going to be a good tool for us to use to try to brute force this. That we have this text here that we can go by as an indicator of an invalid key. So that would be useful for a brute force attack. And then try to figure out, I'm sure it's probably, since the comment in the page source said that this wasn't complex, it shouldn't be too difficult to discover what the password is. So in order to do this part of it, there's two tools that we're going to use. One is going to be Hydra to do the actual brute forcing, and the other one is going to be a tool called Tamper Data, which is an add-on for the browser, and it will allow you to kind of intercept the requests as they're going back and forth, kind of like using something like Burp Suite or Zap would do. But it's it'll be a lot simpler and easier to use here. If you don't have Tamper Data installed already in your browser, you just go to Tools and then click on Add-ons and just do a search for it. I've already got it installed here. There's Tamper Data. So what we need to do is find out, when we type something in and hit enter here, we need to find out what the request looks like going to the server so we can see what parameters may be sent over to the page. So if we go ahead and open up Tamper Data, And then we're just going to want to click on Start Tamper. Come back to the website and let's just type something random in. I'm just going to type in some letters and hit enter. And you'll see that you get this pop-up here to tamper with the request. So we're going to click on Tamper here. And we can see the information. And here's the actual post parameter that's getting sent in that request. So you've got the parameter name key and then the value that we're typing into it. So we're going to use that information with Hydra. So let me just cancel this. Stop tamper. I'm going to go ahead and close out of this because we won't need that anymore. So now we're going to move on to we're going to pull up Hydra and see if we can actually brute force that password. So let's go ahead and let's open a new, let's see, what terminal windows have I got open here? Oh, that was our Nmap scan. I'm going to close one of them out. I'm going to clear this screen. Actually, let me just go all the way back here and clear this out so we'll have room, because the command to use Hydra is kind of long to type out. So the way it's going to work is I'm just going to show you what the command is. Hopefully you guys can see this okay. So it would be Hydra, then you put the IP address of your target, which is 186, and we're going to tell Hydra to use the HTTP form post. Excuse me, sorry guys. And then we need to give it the directory path and the page to do the brute force against. So it's going to be, was it KZMB 5NVYJW, and that was the directory that we had found from the picture. It's index.php :key, which is the parameter name that we're looking at, equals, and then this is the part that Hydra will be fuzzing. So we need to do this keyword for Hydra, which is pass. I'm going to do another colon, and then we're going to type invalid key, which is, if you remember when we typed an invalid key in, that was the error message that came back and showed at the top of the page. So Hydra can use that as an indicator of whether or not it has a valid response. Alright, so the next thing we need to do, Hydra would need a login and a password to try against. Since that page doesn't use necessarily a username and password combo, we're just going to give it a bogus username. So I'm just going to call it test. We're going to do attack P, and this is to give it a word list to use for the brute force. And that list, we're going to use the one that's under user share, dict, and I believe it's called words. So that's our entire command line to use Hydra. Now from here we're just going to hit enter, let Hydra run, and let's see if it comes back with anything. Hopefully this part won't take too long. And this too, if you're using a different word list, that's going to affect the speed at which Hydra gets through everything. So just keep that in mind as you're running these. Hopefully this will come back with something. Alright, it's getting there. There we go. It looks like it did find a password. Password of elite. So yeah, that was pretty simple. So now if we, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go back. I'm going to do another screenshot of this. And I'm going to make sure that I want to get the command that I ran for this in case I need to reference it later. Let me just kind of minimize this image a little bit. And one thing to note with Keep Note, it can be a little bit buggy at times. There are times that when you go to resize an image, that the options for it just kind of lock up, and you just kind of have to cancel and go back into it. So just keep that in mind. So let me go back here. Now if we type in Elite, hit enter. So that worked, and now we've been taken to another page that we can look at. So you guys know the drill here. Let's go ahead and do a screenshot of this. Edit screenshot. I just want to make sure that I'm capturing all of these pages. Well, that's not what I wanted. And delete that. Back to the screenshot. I just want to get this piece of it. All right. So now let's have a look at this page and see what we can discover here. So it's asking it lets you do a search for usernames. So we don't have any kind of user info yet. Let's just type in Bob and see what it does. Fetch data successfully. So we can see that the page changes to this 420 search page, which has this parameter that's pulling up the user data. Let's view the page source quick just to see if there's anything in it. That's not the one. Go back to this page and view it. Okay, and it just shows us that that's the page that the form is getting posted to, or it's actually using the get method for that. So you can see here we're at index.php. When we enter a name, the URL changes and shows this information. So the first thing that I think of when I see a URL like this is there could be SQL injection involved. If you notice too that the page source, there weren't any comments saying that this page was not connected to a MySQL database. So more than likely the page is pulling this information out of a database. So we can try to see if we can trigger a SQL error. Just put a single tick at the end of the URL and hit enter. That didn't do anything, so how about a double quote? So now we have a MySQL error, which is good for us because that indicates that there is probably a good a SQL injection issue here, and we may be able to use this to our advantage to actually pull data from the database. Okay, so before we actually get started with the SQL injection, I'm going to go ahead and do another screenshot of this just so I've got a reference point of where we found it and what the error was. So let's just do, I'm going to create a new page in Keep Note. And I'm just going to call this one SQL injection. Now, this is where this tutorial is going to be a little bit different than maybe what you would see from some of the other ones that are out there. Most people at this point would fire off SQL map or something similar to it and let it do all the work for you. But I want to go through this manually just so you can get your hands on with doing SQL injection, and it will give you a better feel and a better understanding for how a tool like SQL Map works, what it's doing in the background. I just think manual exploitation sometimes it's a better way to learn the technique, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The tools come in handy when you're in a time crunch, which is often the case during a pen test. So, you know, feel free, and I have absolutely no issues with running a tool like SQL Map. But for this particular tutorial, I wanted to go through everything manually So you can start working on it, especially if you've never done SQL injection before. You can see what we're doing here step by step through the process and see what's involved with extracting data from the database. So that's where we're going to go with this one. So the first thing that we need to do is we need to find out how many columns that this particular table is actually using. And the command that we're going to use is going to be the order by clause. So we're going to start by doing an order by, let me move that mouse cursor. We're going to, odor. Oh my goodness. Perhaps I should go back and take a typing class. So order by, and since it's a small page, I'm not going to start with a very high number, so I'm just going to do 5. We need to put 2 dashes at the end, and normally you can put a space. Let's try that and see what happens. Don't get anything there, so let's put, we need to encode it. Put a plus sign at the end. Ah, there we go. So now we see that we get this error. Unknown column 5 in order clause, which means that there are less than 5 columns that are used to output that page. So if we go back here and just change that to 4, we get the same error. Change it to 3, and now the page that we get back is the normal page. You see, this is what we got back when we just typed in a random username. So that tells me that there are 3 columns that are available for this page. So I'm going to do a screenshot of this. Like I said, I want to keep track of everything and make sure, if you're following along with these screenshots, make sure that you get the URL so you can see what you typed in at that point. Just going down here. Now you can go back later too, or type in any notes that you want to as you're putting these in here. All right, so we know that we've got 3 columns to work with. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to incorporate a union statement, which basically, if you think about it, let's look at this from the back end side, from the database side of what's actually going on here. So the default page, when you type in a username and hit enter, there's a query that's being used on the back end, and it's probably something like select all from users where username equals Bob. You have that one statement. By using a union statement, you're actually able to combine 2 SQL statements together. So it's going to run this query, and then it's going to execute the query that you put here after it. What we're going to do here, 1, 2, 3. Now, if any of the columns are actually outputting data to the web page, they should show up as a number. And the reason that I'm using 1, 2, and 3 here, it just kind of, you'll see here in a second when it comes up, but this lets you keep track. You could also type in 3 nulls here if you wanted to, but I like using numbers when possible. So if we just go ahead and hit enter here, now you can see that we've got this data returned to us. And these numbers correspond to the number that we put in our union statement. So since all 3 of them are output to the page, we should be able to extract data and have it displayed on each of these. Before we do that, let's go back and do another screenshot. Sorry, I know if you're watching this that it may seem a little bit slow, but I want to make sure that we're taking our time and that you guys are seeing what I'm doing and that you're understanding it. So the next thing that we want to do, let's just see if we can get some basic information about the database. So I'm just going to use the third column here. Let's do see if we can get the version of MySQL that's being used. Edit version. So here we go. This is the version of MySQL that's being used on this target host. Let me see something quick. Can I make that bigger? Kind of pull this over a bit, because that's one thing, doing this manually, sometimes these queries that you type in can get quite a bit longer, so I just want to make sure that we can see everything. So let's go ahead and we'll just leave that there and use the number 2. Let's see. Let's see who the user is that the database is running as. So we can see the database is running as root at localhost. And then if I just go ahead and we'll just use 1 to display information. Let's see what the name of the database itself is. So Seth. So Seth is the database name. It's running as root, and this is the MySQL version that's running. So let's go ahead. I'm going to do another screenshot. You'll get sick of screenshots after you see this, I guess, but I just like to capture everything. So let's go back here. All right, so we know that basic information. So now we're going to keep enumerating and see if we can actually pull out any user data with this. And this is where the queries start to get a little bit longer. So I'm going to go back and just delete this part out. Put our original numbers in here just so I can keep track of everything. All right, so the first thing we want to do is get information about the table itself. We want to find out what's contained there. So the query is going to be table_name from information schema.tables, and we don't want it to include every table, so I'm going to do where table schema does not equal MySQL and table schema does not equal information schema. If we hit enter there, and now you can see these are all of the tables that are in the database. And most of the time when you look at these, the ones that are showing in all capital letters, those are usually ones that are quote unquote the system tables, the default tables that are in the MySQL instance. So if we keep scrolling down, usually the ones that we want to look at that will have the data that we want are usually toward the bottom of the list. So let's just keep scrolling down here. And we've got this users here. So this is probably the one that we're going to want to go against. All right, so before I go to the next one, let me just copy this URL here. I'm not going to do necessarily a screenshot this time. I just want to keep a track of that URL that we typed in. So the next thing that we're going to look at, we've got the table information. So this is the table that we're going to go after. Now we need to find out which columns are in this table. So in order to do that, we're going to come back up here. We're going to change this table name to column name. And go over and change this one, information schema.columns. Scroll over so we can see where we're typing here. And I'm going to delete all this out. So we've got from information schema dot columns, and we want to put where table name equals users, which is the table that we found down there. So hit enter, and now we can see we have ID, user, pass, and position. So these are the columns that are inside of that users table. And the user and the pass is what we're going to be focusing on, because that's the information we want to get. So let me quickly copy this URL so we can keep track of it. And obviously, guys, you'll have your own way of taking notes. For this particular tutorial, I normally would probably have put a little bit more detail in here, but for this video, to kind of keep it a little bit shorter, I'm just going to put the URL so we can keep track of at least of what was typed in there to get the information. So going back to this, now that we've got the column names, now we're going to move on to actually extracting data from the database. So we want to get these usernames. So in order to do this, let me just delete everything here so we can start fresh and you can see what I'm typing. I'm going to use the group concat, and you put a parentheses, and we're going to start with I just want to get the user and the pass here. So we're going to do user, comma, and then I'm going to use this this hex character as a separator, pass, parentheses, from users. Now if this works correctly, it should pull out all of the users and the passwords that are contained in that users table. So if we just hit enter, bam, we've got user Ramses and obviously an encrypted password, and then we've got this other user Isis, and it looks like that user account is set to not be allowed to log in. So it looks like the Ramses account is the one we're going to have to focus on here. So let me copy this URL. And this time I am going to copy this out. I'm just going to copy the username and the hash here. So all right. So now we have a username and a password hash to use. So now we're going to have to figure out if we can crack this thing. And probably one of the easiest ways to do that, and this works a lot more times than what you would think, but just if we copy this and then just go to Google, paste it in and do a search, and you'll see if it comes up. Somebody else could have found this same thing. And this first entry here, base 64, hot right here. Password is Omega. So now we've got a password. So Omega. All right, so now let's just go back quick to the web page. Let's just type in Ramses here and see what it shows us. All right, so nothing spectacular there. All right, so now we're going to this is where we need to go back then and reference what we found from our earlier scanning and discovery. So if we'll notice here, SSH is running on the box, but it's a non-standard port. It's on 777. So we're going to take that information and see if we can SSH into the box using the Ramses account and the password that we just found. Alright, so let's pull up a terminal and try to SSH in with the Ramses user and see if we can connect using that password that we found. So we'll do SSH Ramses IP of the target, and then that was on port 777, I believe. Enter. Password was Omega, and there we go, we're connected. So if I just do an ID quick, of course he's not going to be a root user. The goal for this VM was to get the proof.txt file that's located under the root directory. And I'm sure it's not going to be as simple as just going to root to get it. Nope. So we're going to have to find a way to elevate our privileges to get root access in order to complete this challenge of getting that proof.txt file. So this is where, and you're going to find out, once you get access to a machine, a lot of times you're going to be connected as a user that does not have super privileges. So you're going to, if the information that you're trying to get to is not available as a lower privileged user, you're going to have to find a way to try to elevate your privileges. It may not always be possible, but chances are you're going to find something at least that could help you maybe get into another system on the network. So I'm going to go ahead and clear this screen here. And I'm going to go back to Keep Note and create another page. And let's see. I'm just going to call this one SSH Ramses. That way I can take screenshots of anything that I find while we're connected here. So the first place that I'm going to look at is in the users directory itself. There could be something within this directory that can help us out. It looks like pretty standard files, but I do want to look at the bash history file, because sometimes you can find maybe previous commands, usernames and passwords, or something that user had typed in the last time they were logged in. So let's cat out the bash history file. Bash history. I'm going to scroll up to the top. Now yours may look a little different than what mine is. Let's see, bash history. So if we just look down through here, it looks like they had changed into the var www directory, into the backup directory. They ran ls on that directory, and then they ran a program called procwatch, which is probably something to do with the running processes on the system, I would guess, just by this. So let's let me clear this out. Let's go into that directory and see what we've got. Procwatch. So what happens if we run this program? Yep, it just gives us it looks like it's just running the ps command. Just a basic view of the processes that are running. Let's see if there's anything in that readme.txt file. I have to fix this mess. Okay. Not really anything helpful there. So let's dig a little bit into this procwatch thing. Now, one thing that we will want to look at, if we can determine how procwatch is actually calling the ps command, that may be something that can help us out. Because here's something to keep in mind, something that could help you. Sometimes when an administrator, a system admin, whoever, makes a program that references a program like PS or whatever it may be, all they do is call the program itself. They don't actually list the absolute path to that program. So the difference being, I could just type in PS here and it would work, or let's see, where is PS located? Is it under user bin? Of course, that was not the best way to look that up. Sometimes I'll just fire off text and there may not. Come on. Sometimes I get a little keyboard happy and just fire stuff off without thinking here. Okay, it's under bin PS. So I could, let me clear this mess out. So I could either type in PS or I could do bin PS. And doing it this way shows the absolute path to that particular program. The potential security problem comes in if you create a batch file or a script and you just reference it like this. This could be a way that gives an attacker the ability to use a malicious version of that program in a directory. So instead of, when you run your, like that procwatch, instead of it running the legitimate PS program, which is located here, it would run the program that the attacker created, which would contain malicious code, malicious instructions of some kind. So we need to find out if that's how procwatch is working. If not, then we'll have to look at other places on the machine that could possibly help us elevate our privileges. So one quick test that we can do is just to create a simple symlink, and it would look like this, ln-s, and we want to do, let's just see if we can get this to work. So what we're telling it to do, we're creating a symlink called PS, and it's going to actually run bin shell when it's executed, or when it's called, I should say. We'll hit enter, do this, and now we can see that we have this PS in the same directory that we've got procwatch here. The next thing that we would need to do to get this to work is we need to edit the path, the environment path, so that this particular directory is included when it does a lookup for commands, because I couldn't, well, let's just do it this way. Let's do it export, I think it's path equals dot colon, and we'll just do $path here. And that should take it. Now if I go back and echo path, or do I may need to log out and back in for it to take effect. Path equals path. Well, let's see what happens when we run procwatch. Let me just see. Procwatch. Hoping that worked. Okay. Looks like it did work. ID. Ha! Bingo. We now have a root shell. So this did work. So apparently procwatch, however it was compiled when it was written out, is only referencing PS by itself. It's not actually referencing it by the full path to the program. Or it wouldn't be bin shell, but bin PS. So now let's see if we can get to that proof.txt file. If I go to, try to go to the root folder now, proof.txt, cat proof.txt, bam. Oops, too far up. It looks like we have an MD5 hash and a message. We have pwned the box. Awesome. So we now have root shell. So in addition to getting this flag from the author, we should also be able to look at the shadow file. Can't, it's not CD, cat, Etsy Shadow. And here we go. And it looks like we've got a couple of other users here too. We've got Eric and Bob and password hashes. So we could pull those out and attempt to crack these, see if we can get their passwords as well. But yeah, you can see just from a simple, maybe an oversight in the way that the admin per se created this program and not fully thinking about the way he was setting it up, it caused a security issue. As you can see, here's the other problem, and I just noticed this. I should have pointed it out before. But ProcWatch is set with a SUID. It's a SUID program, which means that it's running with root privileges. I should have pointed that out. I just now happened to notice that. But anyway, guys, that's it. We got into the system. We got to elevate our privileges. We found the flag that the author intended for us to get. And then we were able to get other accounts off of the system. Now from here, once you would get access to a system, then you wouldn't just stop here. I would actually continue looking around the entire machine and see if there's other information that you can get off of it. Whether that's, maybe you look at some of the other log files, you look at the programs that are installed, look at the config files and see if there may be default usernames and passwords that are hard-coded into some of those things. Those are just some of the things that you can find, and yeah, that was actually a pretty good challenge. It wasn't too difficult, but it was something that we had to kind of think through a little bit. So I guess that's going to wrap it up for this one. We got our flag, so that was the goal of the virtual machine. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I went kind of slow through it, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understood and saw what we were doing. And I hope that you were able to learn something new with it. It would be a good idea for you guys to maybe have a look at some of the other virtual machines that are on VulnHub. Download them, get them set up in your lab, and try to go through them. And like I said earlier, if this kind of a series is something you guys would be interested in, I can go through and download some of the other machines and work through them, and we'll just do maybe a series on the techniques that are used in getting root. I'm not saying I can do all of them, because some of them are considered to be a little bit harder, but we'll definitely work our way through them and see what happens with it. So if you have any questions or comments on this one, just leave them in the description below. And I may actually take the like the SQL injection commands that we used. I'll go ahead and include those in the description so you can have it as a reference. And then I'll give you some other links where you can look up some more information on stuff like SQL injection. So again, appreciate you guys watching. Let me know if it's something you want me to keep going with, and I will throw some more out there like this. Have an awesome day, guys. Talk to you later. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If it's your first time here, I would love if you subscribe to the channel and share it out with all of your friends. So my hope is to build a community where we can help each other learn and grow in security, especially if you're just getting into it. If you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. And again, thanks for watching. I hope you all have an awesome day. See you guys.